And now we're happy to address any questions you have about data mining and predictive analytics. This is the free consulting segment of our webinar, which is open access to the modeling agency's advanced analytic gurus, senior consultants Scott Terry and Keith McCormick. So each question you submit will receive multiple perspectives. We do have a few great questions coming in now, but there's room for a few more. Although we do have to wrap up, obviously we are going over, so we'll try to concentrate a few of these questions together as well. So just enter your questions into the text field of the webinar panel. I'll be pleased to read them aloud for myself, Scott, and Keith to respond. Let me get one administrative question out of the way very quickly. Mr. Hamad asks, the webinar is repeated periodically. Does it have the same content, or are they different? It's largely the same. If you attend it once, you come back in the near future, yeah, the bulk of it will be the same. Obviously, we talk about the polling results. The Q&A is going to be different every time. We make some updates to the primary content, but yes, for the most part, it is the same. TMA is going to come out with an additional service beyond the standard webinar, which we will continue to run, that will have different content, and I would highly encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. That field is on every page of the website. It's in the header at the very top right to receive an announcement that I think will come up with an event that's going to be very attractive to all analytically curious and those who are practitioners. So that'll be an event to be announced a little bit later. Let's go along with our first analytic question here. Can you define, this is from Julia, can you define modeling and data mining? And I would start by saying with data mining, I've seen multiple definitions of just data mining, where many perceive it to be just pulling, essentially just an extract from a large amount of data. You know what you want to ask of the data. So you're just looking to do a certain SQL extract of certain data. You know what you're looking for. And of course the other, and that's not a wrong definition, it's just that many run with two definitions. The other one is, I would say, a combination of predictive analytics and segmentation or clustering, looking for relationships, not necessarily predictive. And that's more of the intelligence aspect of data mining, looking at either the predictive or the more complex descriptive, using machine learning techniques to look at both kind of pattern matching and distance mapping to come up with looking at more complex interactions in the data and be able to explain that better. And modeling, I think that's the ability to stamp down a process around analytics from beginning to end. I think many refer to it as starting with data preparation. Our practice model starts well before that, but many perceive predictive modeling or analytic modeling to be the process, the repeated process that you would go through to road mapping how the data will be prepared through to how will the results be deployed. So that's my high-level stab, and let's have the experts extend that a little bit. Let's start with you, Scott. How would you define modeling versus data mining, or any other aspects of terms that you'd want to compare?
Yes, but first let me get a mic check to make sure that I had myself on mute while you were speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was concerned about that. The panel shows you not connected to audio, but you're coming through loud and clear, so by all means proceed. Yep.
We love technology. Okay, good question, good question. I do look at it a little bit differently. I look at predictive analytics as being a specialized subset of general analytics, and my definition of data mining is that it is the technologically and algorithmically assisted discovery of previously unknown and valuable patterns within large sources of data. Now, to go back to an example that was put before, it's about pattern discovery, first of all. The patterns are unknown prior to doing your data mining, as opposed to patterns that are known. So, for example, if I ran a SQL query that said, give me a report of sales by region by month, I wouldn't, even though that yields valuable information, I would not consider that to be data mining, because that pattern was known at the time you ran the query. So data mining is about pattern discovery within large sources of data. And if that is data mining, then predictive analytics is essentially projecting those patterns onto other data. So within every predictive analytics or predictive modeling process, data mining is a subset. All data mining is not predictive analytics, but all predictive analytics involves data mining.
Well put. I like that. And Keith, would you like to extend, or I can go on to the next question, whatever you prefer?
Yeah, just two quick things. As both of you know, Scott and I would tend to agree on such things. I just would like to emphasize 2 points that I think are quite consistent with his comments. One is that this notion of previously unknown patterns is terribly important. So that contrasts what we're talking about in this call with things like hypothesis testing, for instance. Hypothesis testing is terribly important, but it always presumes that you have a hypothesis. So what we're doing is rather different than that, right? Even though certainly there's some overlap between these topics and statistics. And the other one for me, you know, as you know, Eric, in the model practice framework and in ChrisDM, we have deployment phases. For me, it doesn't qualify as predictive analytics without deployment.
Oh, good point. Yeah, it's the old tree in the forest if nobody's around, right? Did it make a sound? And at least for deployment, the answer is no. You really didn't make an impact if you didn't get there. And what was the rest for, unless you're just trying to build some tactical experience, and it's an empty exercise. So great point. All right, on to the next question, and we realize we're going a bit over here, and we again thank those of you staying with us and enjoying some of this additional content here. It's like overtime on real time. So next question, it's a great one from Bessie. What are the risks associated with the dissemination of data analytics? I think I know where Bessie's going with this, but I'm always hogging up the mic here, so I'm going to sit that out, maybe add at the end. So let's start with Keith on this one. What are the risks associated with the dissemination of data analytics? Well,
there's a number of things that come to mind, but I'll pick up on just one point, and then I'll be curious to get what Scott's opinion on this too. But I think that very often on first-time projects, people underestimate the amount of organizational resistance that might be made. I mean, as people that engage in this kind of activity, we're basically change agents. You know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with a better way to make decisions, obviously using data and models at its core. So there's some other decision-making process that already exists. And since the models are going to help those folks, there's really no reason why this ultimately has to be a problem. But the reason that organizational resistance is ultimately so common is that people aren't careful enough to alert the people that are part of the current decision-making process that the project is underfoot. You know, that they always wait until the end when the model is done. And it's so critical to get their input, not only to avoid organizational resistance, but also to get their knowledge so that the model is improved. So I think that's one of them. There's a lot of this, modeling in the background and then just kind of reveal this master plan to your colleagues, and that usually doesn't work out.
Darn it, Keith. All this studying I did on machine learning methods, and you're telling me I'm actually going to need some soft skills to succeed at this.
Yeah, indeed.
Scott, would you like to extend?
Yeah, very briefly. Keith gave an excellent answer. I would just underscore the fact that you need to talk their language. When you're talking about risks, one of the biggest risks that a geek, and I consider myself to be a geek, has when they're disseminating the information, and I am assuming we're talking about disseminating the information internally, is that you try to explain it, or you tell somebody you've got something that's better than sliced bread, but you can't explain it in a way that they understand it that is of benefit to them. So the communication skills, the soft skills that you guys were talking about is critical, absolutely critical. It does no good to do what you're doing if you can't communicate it in the language that your users will understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, great perspectives. And I'm going to add one here. And Scott, I'm getting a little bit of an echo from your line, and since I don't show you as dialed in, I can't mute. So if you could, I feel like I'm singing the national anthem in a stadium, and I'm sorry about that, Scott. All right, perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap my perspective on the dissemination, the risks associated, and the benefits with the final question here, can we get a sneak preview on a roadmap? I'm gonna bind both of these together, and then we'll have to wrap up. And Keith, I know you had a meeting shortly, so I'm just going to put these together and then do the summary if you had to head off. I know you had a couple of phone meetings here cramped in, and thank you very much for your segment and your Q&A support. So
we're glad to join.
Yeah, thanks so much. Fantastic. So so dissemination, I'll start with the benefits very quickly. When you're looking at disseminating analytics, you're looking, I think, more broadly across the enterprise. And this is one major emphasis of the modeling practice framework for the modeling agency. We weren't out to brand our own process model, but we found a number of constraints with the cross-industry standard process for data mining. And that is, it does have a business understanding stage, but it overlooks a lot of the more complex dynamics that occur across a larger organization or an enterprise. Like Scott was saying, aspects about mindset. We have to look at culture. We need to get leadership involved at the right times, as well as subject matter experts at the right time, and they actually need to be excluded at others so that we can maintain good objectivity for the model. But when you look more broadly across the enterprise, we have the opportunity to understand more about the environments involved, more about the resources that can be shared interdepartmentally, as well as data enrichment outside of your own department. You have a greater understanding of the greater wherewithal that you can bring into the modeling effort. And at the same time, as far as the risks go, I think the greatest risk is, it's fantastic to disseminate analytics and distribute it. But if everyone's not working under a common process framework or roadmap, that's dangerous, because then you're going to have a whole bunch of different sophisticated rockets built, and nobody has a master mission plan or even individual mission plans. So they're all going to be going out into space, into an untested environment, because nobody kind of looked downstream to defuse bombs ahead of time or understand what's involved with the environment, what are the risks out there. And at the same time, what do we need each of these rockets to achieve? What's the mission? What do we need to bring home? What is going to be defined, and this is with leadership, and this is what Keith was saying, that you want to define up front what's going to be meaningful to leadership and to the organization before we launch those rockets. So as consultants, that's what we see time and time again, are those rushing to get at the algorithms and the data. We see tool focus, and let's start building something, and maybe it'll find a home. It doesn't work that way. And that's why that modeling practice framework is so important, to first inspect what's meaningful to the organization, how the results need to be communicated, where's it going to play, is real time truly important? If it is, let's understand how to accommodate it. If it's not, we just saved ourselves a lot of time for doing, training for the Olympics with oversized weights and the like. So, and as far as Swellen, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, as far as the sneak preview of a roadmap, since there's, the roadmap is tailored toward an organization situation. That's why we call the modeling practice framework a framework, because there's parts of it that just aren't going to apply. It's almost like you lop off the limbs of a tree that we're not going to use for a certain organization. After we ask a few top-level questions, certain entire branches may not even apply. So by the time we're done road mapping, it is the specific steps that are going to be involved in how the organization's available data is going to be prepared for its specific objectives, how we're going to build specifically their analytic sandbox, which is going to be different than anyone else's. So could there be an example? Yes, and we actually go through a specific exercise like that in our training, where you'll build the roadmap based upon the framework and understand how to apply the framework, both strategically and tactically. So hopefully that binds those two together well, answers all the questions. And at, my gosh, 25 minutes after the hour, we better draw this event to a close. And I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Keith for their great segments and highly informative Q&A contributions. We'll follow up with an email shortly with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you. From there, we'll hope you've offered permission for us to stay in touch through the Modeling Agency's newsletter, and that you'll consider joining us at a public training event soon. So make sure to register right away for Orlando to leave enough time to dig into the required prerequisite video modules. Or look ahead to Washington, D.C. in May or Los Angeles in August if the timing and location work out better for you. And keep in mind that your colleagues can join you anytime for 30% off at the same event. Now, if you don't have a training or travel budget but would like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the modeling agency's Escort on Call program. Escort on Call is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant. Simply open up an Escort on Call account and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it, show you how it's done, implement any data mining tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Escort on Call description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. So on behalf of myself, Scott, and Keith, thank you again for attending Predictive Analytics Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.